Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Red Chair Knits podcast, my little podcast about knitting, crochet, and all things yarny goodness. My name is Colleen, and as always, I am coming to you today from my red knitting chair here in my home in Pennsylvania. Welcome back to any returning viewers. And a big hello and welcome to new viewers and new subscribers. I am so glad that you guys have decided to check this little podcast out, and I hope you stick around and like what you see. Today is Sunday, May 14th, 2017. So a very happy Mother's Day to all my viewers who are moms. My own mom is all the way across the country in California, which is where I'm originally from. So I miss her every day, but of course a little bit more on those days when we honor and celebrate our moms. So for those of you who are celebrating with your children today, I hope that they spoiled you and that they gave you plenty of time to enjoy knitting or crochet or whatever project you're working on today. I do have show notes today, so hopefully we won't have the kind of rambliness that we had in the last episode, but I make no promises. I don't have any FOs to show you today. I kind of thought I might have one, but I'm close, just not quite there. So we'll start with that one. It is a hoe and a whip, I guess. So here's my hoe. This is just a plain vanilla sock. 56 stitches on size 1.5 needles. I did a 2x2 rib for the cuff and a heel flap and gusset. This is the Hufflepuff colorway from Bad Wolf Girl Studios. Hi, Meg. And I started this on Monday, this past Monday, as a casted on Monday morning, sitting in third year orientation, which turned out for at least Monday to be a lot of sit and listen. So on Monday, I actually got pretty much all the way through the heel, which was really far for a single day's work. And I was pretty pleased about that. I don't usually get that much done on a sock in a day, so it was kind of exciting to see it come together like that. I had thought for this pair of socks I would do a new heel to me. I guess this is the fourth pair of socks that I've started. I have another pair that's kind of languishing at the moment. And I thought I would try a different heel, because I have done the heel flap and gusset on all the other ones. But I actually got much further than I thought I would on Monday. I thought maybe I'd get partway through the leg and then come home and finish it and have time to look up instructions for whatever heel I decided to do. But that didn't happen, and I basically got done with the leg. I didn't want to knit too far on the leg because one of the problems I had with the pair of socks that's languishing is that they're a little bit tight around my calves. So I think for the time being, until I get to the point where I figure out how to do kind of increases or decreases in the leg to make them wider at the top, I'm going to stick with somewhat shorter legs. Not really shorty socks, but not really completely full length either, I guess, if that makes any sense. Anyway, I got to about this point, and we still had an hour or an hour and a half left in the day, and I didn't want to sit there with nothing to do with my hands, so I just made the call that I'd do another heel flap and gusset and try a different heel on the next pair of socks. So here is where I am on the second sock. I am past the heel. I got all the way through the end of the heel on Thursday, which was our last day of orientation, and then I didn't work on them again until today, which is why they're not done. I kind of thought I might have a finished pair of socks by the end of the week, and I might. If I finish them tonight, that will still be a completed pair of socks in 1 week, which, pair of socks in a week is pretty darn good, especially for me. So yeah, I'm making progress on those, and I am planning to enter them in Meg of Bad Wolf Girl Studios, who dyed this yarn, is having a house color pride cal. I don't remember the exact name of it. Basically a Harry Potter house pride. And so you just have to knit something that is 50 grams or more in your house colors. So I am a Hufflepuff. Most of my classmates, when they first saw these, thought I was knitting Pittsburgh Steelers socks. I'm so not a football person, so definitely not. But yeah, so these are Hufflepuff. This sock weighed in at exactly 25 grams, so I'm hoping this one comes out exactly the same, because then I will just barely make the 50-gram mark. And if not, I'll still have a pair of socks even if I can't enter them in the knit along. So either way, I'm happy. And I am keeping these in my Steel City Stitcher bag that I got as part of a kit at St. Patrick's Day. It's a really nice, high-quality bag. It's kind of thicker than a lot of my project bags, which was good for this week because I was kind of just tossing it in my backpack, and it was getting a little bit of abuse, and it's hasn't had any problems, so pretty happy with that. So that's one. I have two other works in progress to show you. I'm not going to show you my snow melt shawl this week. I haven't made a ton of progress on it since the last podcast, so I think I'll wait and show it to you next time when I have a little bit more done. I do have my study break shawl, which I was working on during study period for the boards. I thought maybe I'd have it done, but I forgot that. So this is a Pure Joy. Sorry. So much for the not rambling, even though I have show notes. This is a Pure Joy by Joji Locatelli, and I'm doing it in colorways. This one, the blue is Jewels, and then the contrast gray is Silver Gray. And they are both by the Kiwi Pop Studio on the Sock Pop base. And I forgot how long these last rows take on a Pure Joy. I have knit this pattern once before, and I enjoy the finished product. I enjoy almost all of knitting it. It gets a little bit frustrating when your short rows are 350 stitches long, as they are at this point. So it takes quite a while to do even one row. So I will hopefully have this done by my next podcast. I am very close. I think I have maybe, I left my row counter on the other side of the room, but I think I have maybe 5 or 6 more repeats, and then it's supposed to be done. So I'm really loving the way the yarn feels, so I'm not in any hurry to finish it, which was one of the reasons that I wanted to knit another one for myself, because the last one that I knit was a Christmas present, and so it did have a time limit, so I felt like I was really rushing to get through these last rows, even when they were long and tedious. It's much nicer to not have a deadline and just pick it up whenever I feel like it and work on it. You do one row or even half a row. So I'm enjoying that. I am knitting this on my Knitter's Pride Cubics interchangeables. I don't know if you can see They're the needles that are square instead of round. I really like them. I don't necessarily notice any difference in the hand fatigue, which is what a lot of people talk about for the Cubics needles. But they're nice needles. They're not as sharp as I had expected them to be when I first bought the kit. But they're really good everyday needles. And I am using a size 7, which is a size up from what the pattern calls for. And I still had leftover yarn from this first colorway, which according to what she says in the pattern, most of the testers did not. And I had the same amount that they did. So I think I must be a little tight even on the 7s. So I'm really curious to see how large this is when I finish it. Because I do remember that the last one I made, I did on 6s, and it wasn't quite as big as the pattern specs. So I'm hoping that by going up to the 7s, I get something a little bit closer to the pattern specs. So that's this whip. The other one that I'm working on, I have not yet shown on the podcast. I just cast this on 2 or 3 days ago. And this is living in my Molly Klein design Cinderella bag. It's not going to fit in here for very long, but while it does, it's in here. So, clearly I have not done a whole lot on this one yet, but this is the Cameo Shawl, and it is a pattern by Paulina Popiolek. I actually have the printed pattern, which I don't usually have. I usually use patterns just on my computer. I don't print them out. But this one was the pattern and yarn that came in the January 2017 post-stitch box. So that's why I have a printed pattern. And that is what it looks like. And this box was a Christmas present from my cousin. So I'm really excited to finally get this cast on so that he can see what it was that he bought me. Because I don't think he really quite understood. So this is Primrose Yarn Company. And this is the main color. I think it's called Plum. I have the ball bands. I'll pull them out in a sec. And here's the contrast color. Just look it together. And let's see if I can remember the names. Yeah. So this purple is Plum Tart. And then the white is Snow Owl. And these are the Luscious Sock Base from Primrose Yarn Company. It's my first time knitting with Primrose. I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm still partway through the first section of the pattern. It's going well. Like I said, clearly I haven't done a whole lot. I'm hoping I have enough yarn. So this pattern calls for size 5s. And because I've noticed the number of the shawls that I make are a little bit small, not like drastically small, but just a little bit smaller than the pattern specs, and I tend to have more yarn left over. I don't feel like I need to swatch for a shawl because it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit smaller. So I've just kind of sized up to a size 6 because it calls for a size 5. So I'm hoping that that doesn't bite me when it comes to yardage. But if it does, I'll just rip it back and do it on 5s. It's just knitting. So that's this project. Hopefully by my next podcast, I'll have a little bit more to show you on that shawl. Maybe I'll have added in the contrast color. And that is really all that I've been working on. I have a couple of things I'm planning to cast on soon, but we'll get to those in future podcasts. I still have my temperature blanket that is languishing in the middle of January. So I shouldn't say hopefully. I say hopefully a lot and then it doesn't happen. But my plan is to put at least a couple of rows a week on that moving forward. So next time, y'all can tell me, Colleen, where's the temperature blanket? Oh, we'll see if that ends up getting done. It sits in my living room. Anytime I'm sitting on the couch or in the red chair, I can look over and see it. I'm working on something else. I do have a couple of acquisitions to show. I did go last weekend to Maryland Sheep and Wool. I know I had said in my last podcast that I wasn't 100% sure whether I was going to be going. I think I'm going to kind of combine acquisitions and chatter because most of my chatter this week is about Maryland Sheep and Wool. So, as some of you know, those of you who watched my last podcast, about a week and a half ago, I took my first part of my board exam, which was an 8-hour exam, and it was intense. I think it went all right. We don't get our scores until the end of June, which is a long time to wait for something that's kind of that important. Normally it only takes about 3 weeks, but there's a little bit of delay for people taking it in the time period that I took it. So at this point, I'm just operating under, there's nothing I could do about it now, one way or the other, and it will be what it will be. I put in the work. I feel pretty good about how it went, and we'll see what we see at the end of June. In the meantime, I was pretty exhausted after the exam, so I woke up Saturday morning and thought briefly about going and getting in the car and driving down to Maryland, but from where I was, I stayed the night in Philadelphia near the testing center, and I just couldn't bring myself to think about a 2-hour drive. So I just drove back home and kind of had a quiet day. And then the next morning, I set an alarm and I told myself, look, if the alarm goes off and you feel too tired, don't go. So it wasn't until I woke up and the alarm went off that I kind of made the decision that, you know what, yeah, I am going to go. So I got in the car. It's about a 2.5-hour drive down to the Howard County Fairgrounds in Maryland, which is where Maryland Sheep and Wool is held. And it was incredible. I had such a good time. It was a little bit on the chilly side, which is great for a fiber festival. I don't think I would have wanted it to be as warm as it was for most of the week. Could have done without the little sprinkling and rain that we had off and on all day, but it was an absolute blast. One of the first places I went when I got there, because I got there right around 8:30 in the morning, so I left pretty early, but I didn't want to risk sitting in traffic. And people had talked about long lines to get into the parking. And apparently, from someone I talked to there, that almost always happens on Saturday and does happen on Sunday, but only if the weather is nice, which it wasn't this year. So we didn't have to worry about that. The first place I went when I got there was the Jenny the Potter booth, and I got myself this adorable mug with the little bear with his scarf on. Got the stars and the trees. And Jenny the Potter was there, and she was super sweet. Could not have been nicer. And so I picked up my mug. And it wasn't until the end of the day that I realized I'd been carrying it around all day. She had wrapped it in paper, and I'd put it in my bag. And It's a good thing I was filling that bag with yarn, because it didn't even occur to me that I had this kind of expensive breakable object in my bag all day. But fortunately, it all worked out. My mug made it through, and I have been putting it to good use all week. So that was the first thing I got. I spent a lot of time wandering around, kind of going in circles, because there is a lot there. It was very overwhelming, trying to figure out what to buy, what I could do without, how much money I wanted to spend. There were a number of things that I probably left on the table, so to speak. I did not get the Miss Babs colorway, which I kind of wish that I had, but I got a lot of other fantastic stuff, and I'm going to be quite busy for quite a while with what I did get. So it's not like I'm going to lack for anything to do because I didn't get that colorway. I will say Sunday was probably the time to hit up the Miss Babs booth, because there was no line at all when I went. I actually... So someone had told me that at Rhinebeck they had changed the direction of the line or something, or it wasn't obvious where the line was, and they'd seen people kind of come in and think there was no line and walk in and then get not yelled at, but kind of told, hey, buddy, you're cutting in line, get to the back. So I kind of stood there near the Miss Babs booth for a minute or two, kind of watching to see if anybody else just walked right in. Like, I don't see a line. Am I missing something? But there was no line. So I actually saw 2 or 3 other people after me kind of do the same thing, like walk up and kind of stand just slightly back from the booth and watch for a minute before coming in. And if I hadn't done it myself, I would be like, what are those people doing? Anyway, that's a tangent, and I'm rambling. So I will put some pictures at the end of Maryland Sheep and Wool, but you're probably all kind of at the point like, come on, just show us the yarn. So here is one of the first things that I bought, other than the Jenny the Potter mug, obviously. This is Robin's Egg from On the Round, and I was so happy to meet Rachel. Hi, Rachel, if you're watching. I don't think you probably are, but anyway, this is her Everyday Light base, which is a 100% superwash merino wool, single ply, and this is the Robin's Egg colorway, which I think is just gorgeous. She had a sample knitted up there that just, it kind of sealed the deal, I guess. And I bought a sweater's quantity of this yarn. I don't know yet what pattern I'm going to make. I want it to be kind of a lighter summer tee, because it is a single ply, which would be perfect for that. But I don't have a pattern in mind yet. I did go to Maryland thinking I wanted to get a sweater's quantity, and I had a pattern in mind, but this yarn, I think the pattern that I was going to knit, and I'm still going to knit actually about 2 sweaters quantity worth of yarn. I'll show you the other one in a minute. But this one wouldn't work as well for that pattern. It needs a plain color. So I'm going to keep looking for a good kind of summer sweater, summer top to make with this one. If anybody has any suggestions, let me know. Yeah, so I got that at On the Round. I also got, my yarn is running away off my little side table. I also got this one, which is her signature sock yarn, which is an 80-20 merino nylon blend. And this is a colorway called Bright Side. How pretty is that? I'm not usually a yellow person, but I love this. And I think these would make a very happy pair of socks. Or with the way I'm knitting them these days, 2 happy pairs of socks. And this was actually a colorway, I believe, if I understood the story correctly, a friend of Rachel's was doing fiber share and had her dye up this colorway for her fiber share partner, and she liked it so much that she made it a regular colorway, which I think is pretty cool. So I got that one. I'm gonna have to reach for this next one. Sorry, guys. No, the chair squeaks when I move it too much. This next one I picked up at Nitty and Color. There is her label. And this colorway is called Whiskey and Wine, which is fantastic. Totally me. I had the pleasure at Maryland Sheep and Wool of spending a couple of hours in the afternoon with Jenny of the Lucky Jenny Knits podcast, and we both picked up one of these skeins. I was telling her one of the things you can't see just off camera behind me is the whiskey and the wine. But that's a visual that I don't need in this podcast, so it's off to the side. You can kind of back here see my shot glass collection. So that is the bar behind me. Anyway, whiskey and wine. This is, I think, going to make a fabulous pair of socks. And I bought one other skein from Nitty and Color that I will show you all in a minute. I also picked up some wool. One of these days, I'm going to not turn things the wrong direction when I put them into the camera. So this is fingering, and it's 100% merino again, and 428 yards in 100 grams. This is the Barn Owl colorway, and I bought a sweater's quantity of this as well, and this is going to be the tee. This is what I went to Maryland to get. So this is going to be the Riverlight tee, which is a pattern by Marie Green of Olive Knits. It's I think it's a moss stitch, or maybe a double moss stitch. It's beautiful. The texture is fabulous. And I think this color will show the texture off. And I think that's going to be the first of the sweaters that I cast on. I'm going to have to swatch for that. I'm not a huge fan of swatching, but definitely worth it to get a sweater that fits. And I know it's knit on size 3s. I don't actually have any size 3s. I was looking during the week. I think I'm going to try swatching on size 4s just because I've had good luck sizing up with my shawls. So I may try swatching this on size 4s, and then if that works, pick up a couple of 4s with the appropriate cord lengths. Because I have a pair of 4s that are 40 inches. I do have an interchangeable set of 4s, but I have currently loaned them out to a friend. And they're not really sharp points anyway, and I think I'm going to want sharp points for moss stitch. So that is that. What else do I have to tell you about Maryland Sheep and Wool? It was so much fun, and it was exactly what I needed after the crazy couple of weeks that I'd had during my study period, and then the stress of actually taking the test. I enjoyed my day off afterwards, but it was so nice to kind of get out of the house and chat with all sorts of fabulous fiber people, because knitters really are just the nicest people in the world. And I do want to give a huge shout out and hello to Jenny of the Lucky Jenny Knits podcast and all of her knit group friends who were there with her, who were so friendly and welcoming when I spent some of the afternoon with them. So, hi, ladies. Oh, the last thing that I got at Maryland Sheep and Wool right before I left, I was still with Jenny and her group, and I saw into this booth, and they had wine glasses that had sheep on them. So I turned around and I said something like, "Hey Jenny, do you need a wine glass with a sheep on it?" And she said, "I think I do." And we laughed. She walked in and looked at them, and I wasn't gonna get one. I really wasn't. And then Jenny decided to get one, and she bought one, and the woman says, "Oh, well, this is our 10th year at Maryland Sheep and Wool, and we're doing a special, so we have a freebie that goes with the wine glasses. Would you like it?" Well, of course, everybody says yes to a freebie. So what the freebie was a second wine glass with an alpaca on it. Well, that got me. It isn't even that I wanted the alpaca, it's the 2-for-1. I'm a sucker for a deal. And so I said, well, of course I have to get one too. So I bought a sheep glass and got an alpaca glass. And the woman said, well, this is the last alpaca glass. So I got the very last alpaca wine glass. Let me show you those. Here is the sheep with the ball of yarn. How cool is that? And really, if I had walked away without buying one, I really probably would have regretted it. I think I'm just going to do my podcast from here, from now on. I just pour myself a glass of wine and sit like this, put my feet up. I will probably cut this out, but this is a great position. I like this. So, here's the sheep. Now I feel like I should grab the wine and pour a glass. And here is the alpaca. I hope there's not too much glare on that. This is probably going to be the screenshot for the episode if I don't cut this out. Oh, it's been a long week, guys. All right. Last but not least, I mentioned this last week. I am putting together a collection of yarn to get me through my medical school clinical rotations. I always forget to mention this at the beginning, but for those of you who are new, I am now a third-year medical student, about to begin my clinical rotations. And so I have put together one skein for every rotation. The initial idea was that I would build this collection from my stash. As it turns out, I think only one of the skeins is coming from my stash. We all know how that goes, right? We start a project thinking this is going to be a great stash buster, and then all of a sudden you just have to have new yarn. Such is life. So my first rotation is Pediatrics, and this is actually the skein that came out of my stash. This is Ribbons and Bows, and to me it just kind of looked like a crayon box, which I thought was perfect for Pediatrics. This is by Counting Sheep Yarn, and this was actually, I believe, a Christmas colorway. So this will be for my first rotation. And the idea is really just to have something that has the memories of the rotation attached, and to be motivation to get at least one project done for every rotation, because I'm going to be super busy, but it'll be nice to have at least one already kind of set out. Most of them will probably be socks, to be perfectly honest. I'm not going to be super creative with one skein shawls or anything like that. But a couple of them might be something other than socks. So here's Pediatrics. After Pediatrics, I have OB, Obstetrics and Gynecology. And I showed you this one, I believe, in my last podcast. This is Six Swans by Unplanned Peacock. And this just said babies to me. Shocker, right? After OB, I have family medicine. And I showed you guys this skein last week, or last podcast, but I hadn't decided at that point to use it for family medicine. This is from On the Round, her signature sock yarn. This was from her seconds sale. And she called this one Ugly Duckling. Now, for those of you not in the medical field, family medicine sometimes gets a reputation as, the ugly duckling. There are not a lot of students who want to go into family medicine when they start med school. It's a really cool specialty from everything that I've heard, and I've shadowed a couple of family med doctors and really enjoyed it. And there certainly is a shortage of primary care doctors in the country. And in family med, you really get to do a little bit of everything, but it still remains kind of the ugly duckling that, a lot of people think, oh, family med, I don't want to do that. And I've heard some of my classmates complaining about, oh, we have to do family med. I also think this skein is really, really cool. And my first thought when I saw this skein was, I should have bought like 5 of these. This is awesome. So I'm hoping that's how I end up feeling about family medicine. That, it maybe doesn't, get the respect that a lot of specialties do, but it's really cool. So, Ugly Duckling. After family med, I have psychiatry, and this is the other skein that I picked up at Maryland Sheep and Wool, also from Knitty and Color. And this colorway is called Ain't It Fun? I don't think I need to go too much into why this one says psychiatry. So this will be my psychiatry skein. After psychiatry, I have surgery. And I showed you this one in my last podcast as well, but just for completeness' sake. This is from Groovy Hues Fibers. Suzanne is the dyer there. I picked this up at the Steel City Fiber Festival a couple of weeks ago, and this one is called I Run on Duncan. And from what I hear about the hours on surgery, I will be running on Duncan. After surgery, I have neurology. And I don't yet have a skein for neurology. So if anybody has any ideas of a colorway that says, stroke or traumatic brain injury or just brains in general, leave it in the comments. Let me know. I have until January to find a skein for that rotation. After neurology, I do radiology. And so this is the only DK weight skein in the collection. Everything else is fingering. This is another from On the Round. I seem to have a lot of Rachel's yarns in this episode. But clearly I love them. And this is Everyday DK in the Pixel colorway. which seemed very appropriate for radiology. And I actually have 2 skeins of this, so if I do decide I want to make a DK shawl or something, then I have enough to do that. And last but not least is another skein that I showed you last week. This is from Wool and Vine Yarns in the Gatekeeper colorway, which was the sock yarn for the club color for March, I believe. I didn't even mention my last rotation. This is internal medicine. And I picked this one for internal medicine primarily because of the name, Gatekeeper. Internal medicine, doctors, the hospitalists and general practitioners tend to be the gatekeepers. You know, they're the first people to see the patient, and then they decide who else might need to see the patient, what other specialties might need to be involved. And internal medicine as a specialty or as a residency is also kind of the gatekeeper to a lot of other specialties. So there are a number of specialties, cardiology, nephrology, gastroenterology, allergy and immunology, oncology, huge number of specialties that you do an internal medicine rotation, or not rotation, but an internal medicine residency, and then a fellowship in that subspecialty. So it's kind of the gatekeeper to a lot of different specialties. So that seemed appropriate for that one. And believe it or not, that will be a year's worth of knitting. And then we get to do this all over again, where we have another big exam at the end of the 3rd year. And then we do a bunch of 4th year rotations while applying to residencies, and then graduation, and then we're doctors. Forget earlier, that's probably going to be the screenshot for this episode. Oh, man. The only other thing that I wanted to show you guys today, because it is Mother's Day, and I tend to swap out the pictures that sit on my bar or sit on my craft corner just every couple of months, or kind of when the mood strikes me. And I recently switched out the photograph behind me on the bar, so I wanted to show you what I had replaced it with. This is a photograph that I found. I've known it existed. I've had a copy of it on my computer for years. I do amateur genealogy as a hobby, so I am the family historian. And I have been kind of designated keeper of all pictures. I went and scanned probably a couple hundred pictures of my mom's family at my aunt's house a couple of years ago, which is when I first found this picture. And I rediscovered it a couple of weeks ago when I needed a baby picture for a party I was attending. So this is my great-grandmother. I'm trying to avoid the glare. But if you can see, she is knitting a pair of socks. Just kind of hanging out on a bench, I guess. There was a caption on this picture that said something about knitting a sock for my soldier, which would put this picture somewhere during World War I, before she married my great-grandfather. They went to high school together, and then he joined the Army, and after he got out of the Army, they got married. So it was a good 4 or 5 years after high school, which was a little bit older for people back then. So I would guess this picture is probably 1917, 1918, somewhere around there. And there she is, just kind of chilling sitting on a fence, knitting a sock. And I just think it's really cool. My mom says she never remembers her grandmother being a knitter. But apparently she was at least for a little bit. I think it's one of those things that back then everybody learned and then not everybody kept it up. Anyway, I just thought you guys might find that interesting because this is a knitting podcast. I don't talk much about the genealogy because it's not really a genealogy podcast. But I love my family history. So that is really all that I have for today. I will put some pictures from Maryland Sheep and Wool at the, I guess, right after this. So feel free to stick around for those if you want to see some sheep and some wool. And otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful couple of weeks until I talk to you again. Yeah, I really need to work on how I end these podcasts. That's what I've noticed. It's very awkward at the end. Anyway, happy knitting. Have a wonderful couple of weeks.